Hello. Okay. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for coming. Even though we only have 3 people here, 4 including me. So, but we will still continue because this will be recorded and later, inshallah, we can, for anyone who wants to look at it again, they can watch it. All right, later in Centris channel. Okay, so today we are going to continue with the book, the Black Book, or the book on Wasatiyah, or the Moderation book by Almarhum Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Dr. Muhammad Kamal Hassan. So in the previous session, we have discussed the introductory part, but today we are going to discuss the second part, the starting of the second part, which is chapter 1. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, the book consists of 3 parts: part 1, part 2, and part 3, and each part has its own chapters. For example, part 1, it has 4 chapters. Part 2, it has 3 chapters. Part 3, it has 4 chapters. So altogether, the book actually consists of 11 chapters, but divided by 3 parts. Okay, so part 1 here, as you can see in the slide, part 1 entitled Promoting the Common Ground Amongst Religions and Cultures. And the chapter 1 entitled The Expanding Spiritual Moral Role of World Religions in the New Millennium. Okay, so we are going to discuss today, inshallah, chapter 1. But I think we will not finish the whole chapter today. We will continue, inshallah, in the next session, continue discussing the first chapter. Okay, because the first chapter itself, as we will see, is divided into a number of subtopics. Right? Okay. So the subtopic number 1 is turning towards the sacred. Okay, as I mentioned earlier in the previous session, the book is actually a compilation of Almarhum's writings back then when he was trying to address uh, the phenomena that happened uh, when the 9/11 event happened, okay, took place. So actually the book is a compilation of his writings as a response towards that event. Okay. Okay, so coming back to turning towards the sacred. So implicit, okay, by the way, as I mentioned, I'm going to read word by word and I will explain from the political science perspective because I'm from political science. If you have any other addition, any other perspective, for example, the perspective from history, I have here Sister Nazira. She perhaps has can give input uh, from the perspective of Aqidah and Usuluddin. All right. So you can simply interject, okay, and give your thoughts, okay, on the points. All right. So the first paragraph, implicit in Karen Armstrong's work, "Does God have a future?" is that mankind needs God. All right. So meaning to say, here Karen Armstrong is a well-known scholar in the field of religious studies. So she is not a Muslim, but she studies Islam a lot. All right. So here Almarhum, he quotes Armstrong work, "Does God have a future?" In that work, she stressed that mankind needs God. Okay, the conclusion, is mankind needs God. Okay, we as human being, for her we need God. Because human beings are not only Homo sapiens, but we are also Homo religiosus. Alright? A being that needs religion. And religion fulfills that need. Religion, according to Armstrong, will play a bigger role in 21st century. Okay, 2000 and above forward, according to Armstrong, religion will play a bigger role than before as the world and mankind continue to face serious moral, social, environmental, economic, and political crisis. All right, so she says that religion will be the dominant force, okay, in the 21st century, because we human beings, we face serious moral problems, serious environmental problems, economic depressions, okay, political problems across the world, right, and social problems too. And this is because of the emergence of the new world order. All right, according to Armstrong, all of these problems are actually because of the emergence of a new world order. Okay, or rather the new world disorder. So Almarhum, he said that this is actually not a new world order. It is not in orderly manner. It is actually the one that creates these problems. Therefore, we should call it as the new world disorder. Okay, the new world that we live in, but it is in a chaotic situation. So new world disorder, this new world disorder is actually, according to Almarhum, consists of the triumphs of capitalist globalization, okay, plus the ICT revolution. So the triumphs of capitalist, liberal capitalist system, all right, as the dominant system. For example, Francis Fukuyama, he wrote that book, okay, The End of History. Francis Fukuyama was suggesting that liberal capitalism now, okay, has won the battle. Okay, the ideological battle between the liberals and, for example, the socialists, Muslims, okay, Islam, religious ideologies. So for him, for Fukuyama, liberalism has triumphed, and therefore we do not need to write more, okay, other histories. So for example, new regimes of communism started to emerge here and there. For him, no. Now, today, liberal capitalist system is the dominant system, and it will be there forever. Okay, and that is the one of the elements that we have under the new world disorder. The other one is the ICT progress. Okay, progress in ICT, information and communication technology. All right. So combination of these two, the results, we have borderless world. Okay, borderless world with a grim prospect for ecological disaster. So a grim prospect, right? That brings ecological problems, environmental problem, permissiveness, hedonism. Okay, hedonism. Uh, we only focus on worldly affairs, aimlessness. Okay, we do not have objectives, alienation, delineation, sidelining of minority groups, for example. We become minorities, and hideous violence here and there, while great progress is being made in science, medicine, and technology. Right? Even though we are progressing in terms, okay, in the field of science, in the field of medicine and technology, but at the same time, okay, the side effects, we have all of these problems, right? Ecological problems, uh, hedonism. Okay, so modern scholars promote the belief that modernity and the so-called progress would make mankind less and less dependent upon religions or faith in God. Okay, so many modern scholars, they are thinking that actually progress, okay, when we have progress, when we have modernity, we will become less and less dependent on our religion. Okay, we do not believe in God anymore. If at all religion is to survive in the world of modernity and scientific progress, it has to be marginalized to the private realm only. Okay, so uh, if we still want religion to be there, it's okay for the so-called modernists, okay, but it must be confined within uh, our own private affairs. All right, we should not publicly, for example, do dakwah, publicly promote our religion to other people. Okay, if you want to talk about religion, you can talk about it, but among, okay, within your own group, for example, okay, very small uh, groups, right? Because while autonomous human reason reigns supreme in the public sector, because we must focus on human reason, okay, because this is more important according to the modernists. All right, religion is not important, but human reason should be there, promoted, okay, in the public sphere. This was in fact the solution that modern European society after the period of enlightenment and the age of reason chose to overcome the problems posed by dominant Christian authority, the church dogmas and bloody interreligious conflict. All right. So back then, during the Middle Ages, before the Renaissance, before the Enlightenment, the Europeans, they were fighting, okay, the church, right? The Catholic Church. Okay. So why did they fight the church, the Catholic Church? It was because the church was corrupted, all right? Misused its power, oppressed the people. Okay. So that's why they went against the church. All right. So they got enlightenment. Right. The problem with this solution, which became a characteristic of the worldview of secularism, meant that the colonized Muslim states should adopt it as their very own, since it has served its purpose in Europe and North America. All right. So for the Europeans, after they finish with the Enlightenment project, they started to think that, oh, we managed to get rid of these problems of, okay, Catholic Church. Now we should also promote this approach, all right, of rejecting religion towards the Muslims. All right. So for the Christians, for the Europeans, they feel like in order to progress, okay, we must adopt secularism. Okay, we must reject religion because religion is bad. But that was their experience. It is not our experience. Okay, for us Muslims, religion and modernity can go hand in hand. All right. Uh, so they are trying right now to enforce their model, that secular model, to us. All right, because for them it has served the Europe and the European countries and North America. This is of course part of the old agenda of Western imperialism and a manifestation of the tendency of absolutizing Western ideas and values. All right. So this, according to Almarhum Prof, is none other but the old agenda of Western colonialism, because they want to colonize the Muslims. All right. And a manifestation of the tendency of generalizing Western ideals towards non-Muslims and non-Europeans, meaning to say those people who do not subscribe to secularism, for example, Muslims. Okay, so the rationalism and skepticism of the age of enlightenment of 17th and 18th century Europe paved the way for the dethronement of European religion, and consequently scientism replaced the belief in God. Okay, so again, during the Renaissance, they managed to overthrow the Catholic kings, for example, in England. All right. So uh, later on in France, right? So they paved the way. Okay, these projects paved the way for scientism. Okay, so they believe more in science, okay? Replacing the belief in God. All right, because of their bad experience with the Catholic Church. Thus, religion was rejected by, for example, Karl Marx. All right, Marx mentioned that the sign of the oppressed creature, the opium of the people, which made this suffering bearable. Right? Religion, according to Marx, is the opium of the people. It's like a drug. All right? Which made this suffering bearable, oppressing the people. Okay? If you believe in religion, then according to Marx, you will not progress. Then Nietzsche in 1882 declared that God was dead. And Freud, okay, certainly regarded belief in God as an illusion. To believe in God is to believe in illusion that mature men and women should put aside, should lay aside, according to Freud. All right, but okay, okay, later we will see. So the spirit of scientism and the faith in it was no less religious in its intensity when Freud declared, no, all science is not an illusion. An illusion, it would be to suppose that what science cannot give, we can get elsewhere. So actually, even though they rejected really religion, but actually their own belief in scientism is actually just it is actually just like also just like a religion. The belief in religion, science is their religion, right? Okay. It is important to mention at this juncture that, as Karen Armstrong points out, the European scholars and philosophers' rejection of God or religion was in respect of a particular notion of God and a particular type of religion. So according to Armstrong, actually, their rejection, as I mentioned earlier, their rejection was not, okay, was on one particular religion, which was the Catholic Church. All right. So these thinkers, for example, that we mentioned earlier, Marx, Nietzsche, Freud, okay, they rejected the Catholic Church. Okay, she says the philosophers of the Enlightenment did not reject the idea of God. However, okay, actually they did not reject the idea of the existence of God. What they rejected was, okay, the cruel God of the Orthodox who threatened mankind with eternal fire. They rejected mysterious doctrines about him that were abhorrent to reason. All right? So they still believe in God. For example, Okay, she says, Armstrong says, Voltaire, in his philosophical dictionary, argued that faith in one God was more rational and natural to humanity than beliefs in numerous deities. All right, so according to Voltaire, the radical thinker, okay, he said that okay, even Voltaire believed in one God. Here, that faith in one God was more rational. Okay, it is not confirmed that he believed in one God, but he actually mentioned here to believe in one God is much more rational rather than beliefs in numerous deities. So, similarly, Spinoza, another philosopher, okay, thinker, a Dutch Jew, came up with ideas which were very different from mainstream Judaism and which had been influenced by scientific thinkers. According to Spinoza, though he is regarded as an atheist, did have a belief in a God, even though this was not a God of the Bible. So even Spinoza believed in one God. All right. So when Nietzsche declared that God was dead because man had killed him, he was actually rejecting the notion of God that was prevalent in European culture and society. Meaning to say, the Catholics, okay, uh, the Christian Catholics, Catholicism. So he was rejecting Catholicism when Nietzsche declared that God was dead. He was against Catholicism, okay, because of the problems that I mentioned earlier, corruption here and there by the church. So the so-called death of God movement, together with the modern philosophies of secular humanism, positivism, and materialism in the 20th century, led some Christian theologians, such as Harvey Cox, to endorse the reality of secularity, as though it was the will of God that man, having come of age, should conduct all public affairs without any reference to God, for he is no longer present. So we can see here the death of God movement, as mentioned by Al-Marhum, all right, became dominant. Okay, it became quite typical to have such a movement. All right, they promote secularism, right? And they are Christians. So this is problematic. Okay, we can see that it is quite problematic. The death of God movement, together with the modern philosophies of secular humanism, positivism, and materialism in the 20th century, led some Christian theologians to endorse the reality of secularity. So they endorse the model of secularity. All right, because for them God is no longer present. So we can see how strong this movement is. All right, the movement of separating religion with modernity. All right, so uh, that's it. I finished the first subtopic, but maybe we can, because we still have time. Okay, I will move to the second subtopic. All right. Ada sister tadi masuk eh? Sekejap lah, dia duduk sini. Sister ah. Sister dari mana? Dari kuliah mana? Alumni. Memang datang tengok ni lah ada program ni. Oh, tengok library. Kita boleh tengok. Ingatkan datang ambil. So, kita ada iklan dekat WhatsApp. Okay, tak apa. Mana ya? Wait, I'm looking for that slides. Okay, so we are still in the same chapter 1, but we are going to discuss the next subtopic, which is the challenge to secular modernity and development. All right. Okay. So, while natural science celebrated its achievements and successes independent of God or religion, the emerging social sciences in Europe and America saw religion generally and non-Western religions in particular as impediments to human progress. All right. So we have seen just now, according to them, they succeeded with their enlightenment projects. So for them now, everyone should follow that secular model in order to progress. All right. So they started to see other religions, especially those non-Western religions, as blocking or impeding or stopping human progress. So modernization in the Western conception was promoted as the path to that, okay, that the so-called third world countries had to follow. Okay, so we, for example, the third world countries, we must follow that secular model in order to progress, according to them. To the Western social scientists such as Weber, Talcott Parsons, Daniel Lerner, and Huntington, and many others, modernization necessitates rationalizations and secularization, or the diffusion of secular norms. We must, for them, okay, we must be secular in order to be modernized. This is to be expected as both in Western Europe and the United States. The first half of the 20th century was perceived as a steady triumph of secularism. Okay, so the first half of the 20th century was regarded as the period when science triumphs. All right, what kind of science? Science that was secular. As such, the religio-nationalist leaders of Afro-Asia were downplayed by the colonial powers and largely ignored by Western scholars. They were characterized as fanatics or traditionalists. Okay, so those people back then, during the early half of the 20th century, those religious leaders in Asian countries were regarded as fanatics by these secular modernists, all right, and also regarded as traditionalists. Western social scientists of the 50s and 60s were too preoccupied with prescribing secular modernization and economic development for the so-called underdeveloped or developing world. Okay, so these Western social scientists of during the 50s and 60s, 1950s and 1960s, were too dogmatic with this formula. Okay, you must, they prescribe to us. Okay, you must follow this secular model in order to have economic development, because for them we are underdeveloped or we are developing, okay, world. To foresee the dramatic resurgence of Islam in the 70s or the rise of religious movements in different parts of the world. Okay, so according to Almarhum, this happened, yes, until the 60s, but then in the 70s, Muslim world, especially in Asian continent, okay, we witness the resurgence of Islamic movements. Okay, for example, okay, here. Okay, maybe later. Modernization literature, particularly of the 50s and 60s, says Fred von der Meyden, pictured a decline in religious values, attitudes, and practices. A legitimacy as modernization proceeded in its inevitable forward progress. All right. So according to this scientist, all right, maybe he was a Dutch, he said that literatures or works or research related to modernity, okay, modernization projects during the 50s and 60s, all of them, okay, most all of them mostly portrayed religion as in declining mode. Okay, the decline of religion or religious values in their works, and this was common during that moment. All right. Its model of development and expectations fit an evolutionary development model patterned after what was perceived to be the character of the predominantly secular West. All right. So during the 50s, 60s, this was dominant. Secularism. All right. We must have this kind of model in science. For Max Weber, the popular religions of Asia, okay, so he generalized the so-called popular religions of Asia as the world accommodation of Confucianism. All right, so Confucianism was regarded as to be the world, to be accommodative, world accommodative ideology in Asia. Then the world rejection of Buddhism. So for Weber, Buddhism rejects worldly affairs. And then he said the world conquest of Islam. Okay, so Islam is none other than conquering other people, according to Weber. And this could not provide any path towards a rational, methodical control of life. So Weber, he criticized Confucianism, Buddhism, and Islam. And he said that none of these religions can pave the way to progress. Okay, so the so-called development paradigm adopted by the technologically developing countries in Africa and Asia in the 60s and the 70s was to a large extent a continuation of the Western economic prescription for their former colonies. Okay, what's more, during the 60s and 70s, African and Asian countries, we simply followed the model, okay, the economic model given by, okay, formulated by the uh, Western countries, right? Because we were colonized by them, and we are their former colonies. So we simply followed, okay, their economic model, which is the liberal economic model. Okay, the paradigm calls for the containment or manipulation of religions by the nation state for the sake of economic development and national integration. So this secular liberal capitalist paradigm calls for containment. If not contained, then manipulation of religion by the governments. Okay. Because for them, in order to have economic development and in order to have national integration, national unity, we must put aside religions. Okay, if you still want to include religion, then you must manipulate religion in order to have national integration. So this is the paradigm promoted by the Western world. All right. In the Muslim world, this has led to the emergence. Okay, therefore, in the Muslim world, these problems has led to the emergence of the holistic consciousness of Islam and worldwide movements against secularism and secularization strategies. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, according to Almarhum, during the 70s, later on, we started to witness responses throughout the Muslim world, okay, against this secular model, right? Worldwide movements against secularism and those secularization strategies propagated by the secularist West. So the Islamic struggle against secular modernization also resulted in the Iranian Revolution 1979, bloody conflicts in Algeria 1990s, continued suppression of political Islamic movements in Egypt, Syria, Iraq, Tunisia, Turkey, and Indonesia under Sukarno's and Suharto's rule. All right, so these are some of the movements, Islamic movements that were trying to go against the secular domination. This aspect of contemporary Islam is being studied, analyzed, and labeled by Western scholars under the name of fundamentalism. Later on, Western scholars, they labeled these movements as fundamentalist movements. Okay. Okay, finish the second subchapter. All right. So as I mentioned, I read this from political sciences perspectives. All right, so I may be lacking in terms of other perspectives. So I see we have Dr. Lukman here. All right, Alhamdulillah, thank you for coming. We also have Sister Nazira, all right, specializing in Akidah and Usuluddin from UNIPSAS. And Nurul Intan Shafinas, are you my student or I think you are my student, right? Okay, never mind. If you want to add anything related to this what we have discussed just now, you are most welcome. All right. Dr. Lokman, you have anything to say? Dr. Lokman from education, right?
Yes, I'm from education, but before this, I'm graduated from RKHS for degree.
Yeah. You were in the Arabic department, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Like,
Thank you for coming. Do you want to give
I
any?
think no, because I just show up just now.
All right. Okay.
Thank you
Sister
so much,
Nazira.
Doctor.
All right. Thank you. You want to say anything? Even you can tell us anything if you want. Nothing. Okay. So inshallah, this this is our routine right now. We will read from Almarhum's book each Friday. Okay. Every Friday, either in the morning or in the evening, okay, or 3 p.m. in the afternoon, we will read. I mean Dr. Jannah and I, right? Dr. Jannah is the head of Scholars Channel. She will read Almarhum Prof books, um, two of it, two of his books, right? Number one, Salam Kasih, and number two, The Natural Sciences from the View of Al Quran. But for me, I will read this moderation book and then the other book on corruption. Right? So that's it. Thank you for coming. All right. So we end our session with Tasbih Kafara and then Suratul Asr.